She was England's most powerful monarch. The Virgin Queen who defeated Spain, ruled without a husband, and carved her name into history as untouchable. But behind the golden portraits, behind the powdered mask and jeweled crown, there was a truth her people were never meant to see. Her skin blackened, her hair fell away, her teeth rotted, her mind unraveled into paranoia and silence. Elizabeth I, last of the Tudors, did not die in glory. She died rotting, alone, hidden, and those around her conspired to bury the truth because if the queen was seen as weak, the kingdom itself could collapse. This is the secret story of Elizabeth I's terrifying final days. A story of masks, of silence, and of a body that betrayed the legend. Stay with us till the end because what you're about to hear is darker than any myth ever told. And if you want more haunting tales of history's forgotten truths, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and join us as we peel back the mask of the past. For more than 4 decades, Elizabeth I ruled England with unmatched power and charisma. She became a myth in her own lifetime, a woman worshipped as a goddess, painted as eternal youth, and feared as a ruler. But when her body began to fail her in the final months of her life, the truth was too dangerous to reveal. The Virgin Queen could not be seen as weak. The illusion had to be maintained, even as she rotted from within. In this story, we will uncover what really happened in those final weeks at Richmond Palace. You will discover how Elizabeth's obsession with appearance poisoned her both literally and symbolically, the gruesome symptoms that overtook her body, the silence of her court who refused to speak the truth, the grim treatment of her body after her last breath, and how her passing marked not just the end of a queen, but the death of the Tudor dynasty itself. By the end, you'll see Elizabeth not as the flawless Virgin Queen of legend, but as a woman whose body, mind, and image collapsed in terrifying fashion. From the very first day of her reign in 1558, Elizabeth Tudor understood a dangerous truth. Her body was her throne. She was a woman in a world made for men, a queen with no husband to defend her, no children to secure her line. Every rival monarch, every ambitious noble, every ambassador from abroad all watched her with hungry eyes, searching for a weakness. If she ever appeared old, sick, or fragile, the illusion of power would shatter, and her enemies would descend like vultures. So Elizabeth did something extraordinary. She transformed herself into more than mortal flesh. She became an icon, a living myth. Her pale, ghostly skin was not a gift of nature, but of artifice. She covered her face with a mask of white lead makeup, a cosmetic that shimmered under candlelight yet poisoned the flesh beneath. The powder concealed the scars left by smallpox. It smoothed away every wrinkle. It gave her the appearance of eternal youth, as if she existed somewhere between humanity and divinity. But the price was steep. The lead seeped into her body. It brought swelling, constant headaches, and irreparable damage to her skin. And yet she could not stop. Because without the mask, she was no longer the Virgin Queen. She was simply Elizabeth, a mortal woman, aging before her people. Her once glorious red hair, fiery and proud, began to thin as the years dragged on. Rather than allow her court to see the truth, she crowned herself with elaborate wigs, flaming auburn and golden creations piled high and adorned with pearls. Pearls were not just decoration, they were symbols. Symbols of purity, symbols of the untouched eternal Virgin Queen. They reminded everyone that she was more than a woman. She was a sacred figure, above temptation, above time. But beneath the jewels and powder, her body betrayed her. Her teeth rotted away, leaving her breath foul and her smile darkened by decay. Yet no portrait dared reveal it. Instead, Elizabeth painted her lips in crimson red, a vivid flash that distracted the eye from the corruption hidden within her mouth. And still, when she entered a room, courtiers gasped. Ambassadors wrote home describing a vision, radiant, divine, almost untouchable. They did not see the truth. They saw the mask, a mask that was not born of vanity but of survival. It was her armor in a world that doubted a woman's right to rule. It was her weapon against time itself. Elizabeth painted herself into immortality. She made herself myth. By the bitter winter of 1602, Queen Elizabeth was 69 years old, an astonishing age for her era, when most women did not live past their 40s. Yet longevity came at a terrible price. The Virgin Queen, Once a vision of strength and majesty was now a woman in relentless decline. The courtiers who dared to speak of it whispered in hushed tones. Foreign ambassadors wrote reports filled with unease. Elizabeth had grown gaunt, her once strong frame wasting away as she refused to eat. She pushed away food from her table, nibbling at almost nothing, and her weight plummeted. Nights brought her no peace. Instead of sleep, she wandered her chambers, pacing until dawn, haunted by fears she never spoke aloud. Her brilliant mind, once sharper than any sword in her kingdom, grew clouded. She lapsed into long silences, sitting motionless for hours, lost in melancholy. Some said she was gripped by paranoia, shrinking from shadows, distrusting even the most loyal faces in her court. What had once been political genius now looked like madness, or perhaps something worse. A queen conscious of her own mortality, yet unwilling to bow to it. Beneath the mask of lead and powder, her skin betrayed her. It darkened in patches as if rot had taken root beneath the surface. Ugly blotches spread across her once pale face. Her hair, already thinned by time, came out in handfuls. Her gums shrank back, leaving her teeth loose, and a stench of decay hung about her person. To her courtiers, it was as if the virgin queen was rotting alive, her body decomposing even as she clung to life. What was killing her? Historians still argue. Was it blood poisoning caused by years of toxic cosmetics? Was it cancer, eating away at her from within? Or was it the slow, merciless toll of age and stress, a body broken after decades of carrying the weight of empire? The truth may never be known, but the image was undeniable. England's eternal queen was crumbling before her people's eyes, and yet Elizabeth refused to surrender. One courtier claimed she seemed to wither away, yet never lost her defiance. Another swore she died as she lived, standing tall, for she would not lie down. She would not take to her bed, muttering that if she lay down she would never rise again. Hour after hour, night after night, she remained upright, leaning against cushions or her ladies-in-waiting, refusing the weakness of rest. Only when exhaustion overcame her did she collapse into a brief, restless sleep. The queen who had once towered above her enemies, who had defied kings and armies, now stood at war with her own body. And still she clung to her throne. Even in her final months, Elizabeth would not bow to time, to illness, or even to death itself. In the final months of Elizabeth's life, silence ruled the court more than the queen herself. A dying monarch was always dangerous, but in Elizabeth's England it was deadly. The Virgin Queen had no children, no heir of her own blood. The Tudor line, so carefully guarded for a century, would die with her. And with that uncertainty came fear. Every noble family carried its own ambitions. Every faction in court waited for opportunity. Across Europe, foreign powers lingered like wolves at the gate, watching for the moment the lioness fell. If it became known that Elizabeth was failing, if even a whisper escaped beyond the palace walls, chaos could erupt. Civil war, foreign invasion. The entire kingdom could unravel overnight. So the palace did what palaces do best. It hid the truth. Doctors who attended the queen dared not speak a word. Their reports were vague, their diagnoses evasive. Courtiers avoided detail in letters home. Any message that spoke too clearly of her decline was intercepted, censored, or destroyed. To the world beyond Whitehall, Elizabeth still reigned in strength. She was still the radiant Virgin Queen, immortal, untouchable, eternal. But inside, behind closed doors, the mask was slipping. Servants whispered of her weakness. Ladies-in-waiting saw her refusal to eat, her refusal to sleep, her body wasting away. They watched her fade, yet none dared speak the truth, because Elizabeth's image was not just personal, it was political. Her strength was England's stability. Her mask was the kingdom's survival. As long as she seemed unbroken, the realm held together. Yet even that illusion could not last forever. As the weeks dragged on, her silence became haunting. She no longer held her counsels, no longer spoke with her advisors. She slipped into deep, heavy melancholy. When urged to eat, she refused. When pressed to sleep, she resisted. When offered medicines, she pushed them away. She withdrew into herself until the woman who had ruled for 44 years became a shadow, barely present in her own court. Take this away. The greatest danger was not her death, it was the moment her death was acknowledged. To admit she was failing was to invite war, and so they kept the silence. Even as their queen slipped further into darkness, Her court clung desperately to the illusion of her power. On the cold morning of March 24, 1603, the long reign of Elizabeth Tudor came to an end. Inside Richmond Palace, after days of silence, the Virgin Queen breathed her last. She had worn the crown for 45 years, nearly half a century. She had been the last child of Henry VIII, the last hope of the Tudor bloodline, and now with her final breath an age was closing. The death of Elizabeth I was not just the end of a monarch. It was the end of an era, but death did not bring peace. In many ways, the horror was only beginning. For in Elizabeth's England, a royal death was more than a passing. It was a performance. Ritual demanded that her body be embalmed, dressed in robes of state and displayed for the realm. It was both sacred duty and political theater, a final act in the long play of monarchy. Yet Elizabeth's body was no longer fit for display. Her decline had already been gruesome, and embalming techniques of the age were crude, almost useless against what was to come. They could not stop the blackening of her skin. They could not preserve her hair, which fell away in brittle clumps. They could not hide the collapse of her teeth, the stench of decay that filled the chamber. Servants whispered that their queen had rotted before their very eyes. The court moved quickly. Too quickly. The coffin was sealed earlier than expected, as if the palace itself could not bear the truth of what lay within. And when it came time for the public to pay their respects, it was not Elizabeth's face they saw. The queen, who had been a master of masks in life, was hidden by one in death. In her place stood a wax effigy, pale, painted white, crowned with gold and draped in royal velvet. It was Elizabeth as the world remembered her, majestic, eternal, untouchable. The people who came to mourn did not gaze upon the body of their queen. They looked upon her image, her legend, her myth, one final illusion, carefully staged to ensure that Elizabeth remained immortal in memory, even as her flesh turned to dust. Take this away. Even in death, Elizabeth was denied the simple truth of being human. Her final act was not her passing, but her performance. The Queen of Masks gave her people one last vision, not of decay, but of majesty. A virgin queen, forever unbroken, preserved in wax and paint. Elizabeth's death was not just the loss of a queen, it was the death of an entire dynasty. For more than 100 years, the Tudors had ruled England with fire, blood, and iron will. Their story began with Henry VII's unlikely victory at Bosworth Field, rising from the ashes of civil war to seize the crown. It thundered on through Henry VIII's brutal reign, his 6 wives, and the break with Rome. It burned red during the bloody rule of Mary Boyne, who filled the stake with heretics. And finally, it reached its golden height under Elizabeth, the Virgin Queen Gloriana, who gave England stability, culture, and pride. But with her last breath, that chapter closed forever. The Tudor bloodline, carefully guarded and endlessly fought over, ended with her. She left no heir, no child, no continuation of the dynasty her father had built at such terrible cost. The crown passed instead to her cousin, James of Scotland, uniting 2 kingdoms and beginning the Stuart era. England had entered a new chapter, but it was not the Tudors' story anymore. Yet Elizabeth's myth did not die with her. If anything, it grew stronger. The withered body, the blackened skin, the queen who refused to lie down, these images were erased from official memory. In portraits, Elizabeth remained forever young, forever radiant, draped in jewels, haloed with victory. She became a goddess of empire, the eternal virgin queen who would never fade. But myths are fragile things, and whispers survive where paintings cannot. Those who had served her at the end carried darker stories. Tales of her skin turning black, of her hair falling away, of her coffin sealed in haste because her body could no longer be shown. Whispers of a queen who rotted before she was laid to rest. These shadows haunted her legacy, reminding England that even the most powerful of monarchs, even the greatest of myths, must bow to decay in the end. Take this away. Elizabeth's death was more than the end of her reign. It was the burial of the Tudor myth itself. For while history painted her eternal, the truth of her final days told another story, one that no mask of power, no wax effigy, could ever truly hide. The most shocking truth of Elizabeth's final days is not the symptoms. It is not the blotched skin, the thinning hair, or the stench of decay that followed her through the palace halls. The horror lies in the silence. Those closest to her, Her physicians, her counselors, her ladies-in-waiting looked upon their queen, withering before their eyes. And yet they said nothing. They did not speak the truth. They did not dare. Instead, they chose the myth over the woman. They allowed her to rot behind closed doors, hidden from her people, hidden even from history itself. Elizabeth had spent her entire life obsessed with control, of her throne, of her image, of her destiny. She commanded armies, outwitted assassins, and bent kingdoms to her will. But in the end, that control slipped through her fingers. In life, she had built a mask. In death, that mask consumed her. Her body became a secret. Her death became a stage play. Her memory, a carefully painted illusion. Elizabeth lived for power. She shaped herself into a legend. But that same legend denied her the most basic dignity, the right to be remembered as a woman of flesh and blood. And that is the Virgin Queen's true tragedy. Not that she died rotting, not that her body betrayed her, but that the world never saw her as human at all. To her court, to her people, even to history itself, Elizabeth was never allowed to die. She was only allowed to perform. We have seen the mask she wore. We have followed the illness that consumed her. We have heard the silence of her court, and we have faced the decay that even a crown could not hide. Elizabeth's story reminds us that legends are fragile. Behind every myth is a body. Behind every crown is a mortal. Behind every mask is the truth. But what do you think? Was Elizabeth slowly poisoned by the very cosmetics that made her immortal in appearance? Or were the whispers of her rotting body twisted tales, spread by enemies who sought to stain her legacy? Share your thoughts in the comments. We want to know your view. If this story shocked you, give this video a like. It helps us bring more hidden and haunting truths from the shadows of history. And don't forget to subscribe for more dark tales of the past. Stories of power, betrayal, and the secrets that time tried to bury. They painted her beautiful until the very last breath. But no paint can cover the truth forever. She died as she lived, hidden behind a mask.